500 against 26,000. It shouldn't even be a story, yet here it stands, carved into history's bloodied ledger. On the scorched plains of Montgisard, under clouds of choking dust and heat that clings to armor like molten metal, a 16-year-old king and his band of exhausted knights prepare to hurl themselves against the full might of the Muslim world. This isn't legend or exaggeration. It is October 25th, 1177, so Jerusalem lies vulnerable, its armies scattered across distant campaigns. And bearing down upon the holy city like a thundering avalanche is Saladin, the brilliant sultan, the great unifier, commanding warriors who blacken the horizon with their numbers. What drives men to ride knowingly toward certain death? The answer burns in the crucible where faith meets desperation, where duty consumes fear. This is the impossible charge at Montgisard, a moment when the entire future of two civilizations balances on the edge of a sword, and nothing will ever be the same. The boy in the center of it all wears a crown far too heavy for his young shoulders. Baldwin IV, King of Jerusalem, rides with leather cracked from the relentless desert sun, his hands grotesquely gnarled by leprosy's merciless grip. His fingers, carefully wrapped in blood-stained linen, tremble visibly on the reins, not from terror, but from the bodily betrayal consuming him from within. The disease devours him methodically, cell by cell, even as Christendom demands he somehow save it. Around him gather the battle-hardened Knights Templar, their once proud white mantles now gray with dust, their eyes hollow mirrors reflecting 1,000 horrors. No gleaming heroes of song here, only mortal men reeking of fear and fervent prayer, their armor dented, their flesh scarred beneath. Some weep silently inside steel helmets that hide their despair from their king. Yet forward they ride, because if Baldwin falls today, if Jerusalem falls tomorrow, more than stone walls will crumble. A divine promise will shatter, a covenant between God and his chosen warriors will dissolve into the sand. Saladin must be repelled, not merely for territory or treasure or honor, but because his victory would unravel the very fabric binding their fragile Christian world together. A world where suffering has meaning and death promises glory. Miles away, the desert buckles beneath the weight of an advancing empire. Saladin rides at the vanguard of an army that blackens the landscape like spilled ink. His force 75 times that of Baldwin's meager band. The Sultan wears no crown, yet authority radiates from him like heat from the desert floor. His keen eyes scan the horizon through a film of dust, searching not for enemies, but for any hint of resistance that would confirm Christian madness. Sweat trickles beneath his simple turban, the only indulgence he permits himself on campaign. His conquest is no mindless slaughter, but sacred restoration, each step bringing him closer to a Jerusalem he believes groans under foreign occupation, a holy city crying out to be cleansed. Around him, his generals speak in hushed tones of the boy king, some with dismissal, others with curious respect. Golden banners ripple above their columns like flame, Arabic calligraphy proclaiming Allah's supremacy shimmering in the merciless sun. His soldiers march in rhythm that seems to pulse from the earth itself, their chanting rising and falling like ancient prayer. Saladin feels victory coursing through his veins like sweet water, yet something catches his attention. A solitary raven perched atop a twisted dead tree, its harsh cry cutting through the war drums and prayers. The bird's black eyes reflect nothing, reveal nothing, but the Sultan's hand instinctively touches the Quran at his side. Even the greatest generals know that in this land where prophets walked, omens arrive uninvited, and victory exacts its own terrible price. 4 days earlier, the desert wind lashes through narrow stone corridors in Ascalon, where Baldwin lies shivering as fever consumes his deteriorating body. The news arrives like a death sentence. Saladin has shattered defenses at Gaza, his advance marked by mutilated pilgrims whose blood darkens the sand and shrines reduced to smoking rubble. Jerusalem stands naked, its field army deployed to distant fronts, while the Templars remain scattered across isolated commanderies, each a half-day's desperate ride from the next. Yet Baldwin's response comes without hesitation or doubt. His trembling hands grip the royal seal as he summons what remains of his war council. The gathering that follows isn't strategy, but something closer to ritual sacrifice. Archibald of Ibelin slams his scarred fist against the ancient table until splinters fly, his voice breaking as he pleads for retreat behind Jerusalem's walls. Baldwin watches him with eyes already half claimed by death, then speaks with terrible clarity, each word costing him visible pain. "We ride to meet him, here, at Montgisard." The royal confessor crosses himself, whispering of martyrdom rather than battle. Their own scouts insist Saladin would never risk pursuit through such treacherous terrain with his heavy forces. But Baldwin sees with the unnatural clarity of the dying, understanding that Saladin views them as already broken, barely worthy of conquest. That fatal pride creates their only opening. With poison still coursing through his veins and flesh sloughing from bone, Baldwin mounts his warhorse, its armor weighing more than his wasting body. He commands every Templar knight within reach, every nobleman capable of lifting sword or lance. They gather before him, fewer than needed to defend a single monastery wall. The boy king speaks not of glory or victory, but only of necessary sacrifice, of striking before Saladin can bring his full might against Jerusalem's gates. As they ride south, the desert opens its maw like a beast awakening, swallowing them into heat so intense their armor blisters any exposed skin it touches. By the morning of October 25th, Baldwin's ragged force reaches the dry riverbed north of Montgisard. Parched horses snort and paw at barren earth, nostrils flaring as if they already scent the coming slaughter. The men dismount beside thorny acacia trees, their whispered prayers falling from lips cracked and bleeding from relentless thirst. Flies swarm in black clouds, drawn not just to sweat, but to the sickly sweet stink of rot seeping through Baldwin's forgotten bandages, the disease consuming him even as he prepares to consume himself in battle. Across the vast, unforgiving plain, Saladin's vanguard stretches like an endless serpent of steel and flesh, its commanders utterly unaware that the enemy they dismissed as broken has maneuvered to strike their flank. Baldwin draws his sword with excruciating effort, his grotesquely deformed fingers trembling and barely able to close around the hilt. When the blade finally clears its scabbard, catching the merciless sun, a profound silence falls over the company. A gaunt bishop, himself more beggar than prelate, lifts high a crude wooden cross, its rough splinters driving into his palms as he staggers forward through the dust. Baldwin lowers his helmeted head, not in reverence or prayer, but to conceal a single, involuntary sob that threatens to unravel his carefully maintained facade of strength. He places his bandaged, leprous hand upon the splintered cross, feeling nothing through dead nerve endings. Around him, chainmail clinks like distant, mournful wind chimes as 500 men kneel in the scorching sand. In this suspended moment, history itself hesitates, time forking before them, one path leading to memory and legend, the other to anonymous obliteration beneath desert sands. Baldwin raises his gaze to the horizon, his diseased eyes somehow burning brighter than the sun itself, and deliberately chooses the path written in blood. The charge begins not with a trumpet, but with a silence so absolute it devours sound itself. Then, a single cry shatters the desert air, primal and unhuman, as Baldwin drives iron spurs into his destria's heaving flanks. 500 knights explode into motion, like a wave breaking against fate, not riding toward death, but becoming its embodiment. Dust rises in shrouds behind them, transforming men into wrathful spirits, while the ground trembles beneath the thunder of armored war horses. Saladin's sentries, sprawled in the indolence of assumed victory, scramble upright with terror widening their eyes. Frantic shouts in Arabic tear through the camp. "Frange! Frange! But warning collapses into screams as Baldwin's formation strikes the exposed flank with mathematical precision. The Christian wedge penetrates the Muslim host like a spear through flesh. Templar lances punching through mail to shatter ribs and pierce lungs. Momentum carrying broken bodies deep into confused masses of infantry. The sheer impossibility of the assault freezes the Turkish line, their minds unable to reconcile this suicidal fury with human behavior. Saladin himself stands motionless for 3 heartbeats, watching his vanguard collapse inward in a tangle of trampled banners and severed limbs. He wrenches his horse around, voice cracking as he bellows commands that drown beneath the tide of panic. Men who faced death unflinching now flee before warriors who seem possessed by something greater than mortal courage. Baldwin, his leprous body burning with pain that transcends physical agony, lifts his sword high as blood streams down his arm in rivulets. His ravaged voice carries across the field not as a battle cry, but as terrible prayer, while around him the sky above Montgisard ignites with the incandescent brilliance of history being forged in real time, a moment when the impossible transforms into legend before disbelieving eyes. But miracles demand sacrifice, and battlefields preserve every moment of agony. As sunset bleeds across the horizon, its crimson light catches on blood-slicked armor and mountains of tangled corpses. The plain of Montgisard falls into an eerie silence broken only by the ragged moaning of the dying and the wet, metallic gasps of men with crushed lungs. The victorious Crusaders, too few to properly celebrate, stagger through torn pavilions and shattered ranks, delivering mercy or death with mechanical precision born of utter exhaustion. Baldwin remains upright through nothing but raw willpower, his armor fused to his skin with dried blood, his eyes now sunken and ringed with violet shadow that speaks of death's approaching embrace. He stares unblinking across what remains of Saladin's once invincible host, now scattered and fleeing like a mirage dissolving in the desert heat. Yet victory curdles even as it unfolds. Of Baldwin's 500, barely 200 still draw breath, and fewer still will survive to see another dawn. A holy cross, reportedly carried into battle as divine protection, lies discovered later, cracked in two and consecrated with mingled blood of Christian and Muslim alike. Saladin escapes with his life, but not his pride, his certainty of divine mandate shattered. The humiliated Sultan begins a transformation in that moment, one that will culminate in a retribution that will shake the foundations of empires. Baldwin, hailed as God's instrument, cannot hear the reverent cheers that rise when he finally collapses forward in his saddle, ribs splintered beneath his armor, bandages saturated with yellowed pus and fresh crimson. Montgisard will not grant him life, only immortality. In years to come, when pilgrims kneel upon this scorched earth to pray, the ancient acacia trees will still whisper the truth of a 16-year-old king whose fingers were rotting away even as he pointed the way into the maelstrom and rode unflinching into its heart with divine fire burning in his soul. But the echo of Montgisard does not fade with the dying breath of the fallen. It reverberates through palaces and deserts, through cathedrals and mosques, through time itself. Saladin never forgets. His retreat burns in his soul like poison in an open wound, forcing the great unifier of Islam to confront his own mortality for the first time. 3 years later at Hattin, he answers Montgisard with calculated vengeance, his tactics now infused with the bitter wisdom of defeat. The Muslim forces do not merely defeat the Crusaders, they systematically dismantle them, leaving nothing but scorched earth and scattered bones where Christian armies once stood. Jerusalem falls, its streets running with blood that seems to whisper Baldwin's name even as Saladin's banners claim its walls. Yet even as victory crowns him, the Sultan finds himself haunted in quiet moments by the memory of a boy who should not have prevailed. In private writings, Saladin confesses that no triumph ever tasted as sweet as that day's defeat had tasted bitter. Baldwin dies at 24, his body finally surrendering what his spirit never would, his flesh returning to dust, while his legend crystallizes into something harder than Damascus steel. What remains is not the leprous king whose fingers crumbled at his touch, but the vision that blazes eternal in the collective memory of two faiths. A withered hand wrapped in bloodied linen, resting momentarily upon a splintered cross before pointing toward impossible victory. His voice, though centuries silent, still rides the desert wind that sweeps across Montgisard, carrying a truth that neither Christian nor Muslim can deny, that sometimes, for one blinding moment caught between heartbeats, the impossible steps into the mortal world and forever changes its course. Centuries later, beneath the ruins of forgotten strongholds and in hushed museum galleries, Montgisard's echo persists with haunting clarity. A rust-corroded fragment of chainmail bears witness, its metal fused with both a Christian cross and flowing Arabic script, a physical manifestation of two worlds colliding in blood and fire. Modern visitors glance past it, unaware their fingers hover inches from the remnants of a day when history itself trembled. Scholars debate endlessly, their academic papers dissecting numbers, tactics, and probabilities, trying to rationalize what cannot be contained by reason alone. 500 against 26,000, they argue, wrestling with mathematics that refuse to validate miracle. Yet in Jerusalem, sealed within the quiet sanctity of cathedral archives, lies a yellowed parchment bearing words scratched by a royal hand, already half consumed by disease. God did not ask us to survive, only to stand. The leprous fingers that formed these letters have long since returned to dust, the body that carried them dissolved into the same earth that drank so much blood that October day. But Baldwin's choice, made beneath that merciless sun, continues to burn with ferocious clarity across 8 centuries of human struggle. For legacy lives not in monuments or ballads, but in those impossible moments when the inevitable end of all things stands before us, and someone, against all reason, refuses to bow before it. A dying boy king with no personal future charges into oblivion, and by that very act secures a future he will never witness. Even today, when night winds sweep across the barren plains of Montgisard, they seem to carry a whisper that penetrates the modern soul with ancient truth. Remember when death itself was forced to retreat, when the impossible stood triumphant, when the ending that should have been was utterly rewritten by those who refused to accept it. So what remains of Montgisard? Not the valley itself, now dry and forgotten, ringed with highways and concrete silence where once the ground drank blood like thirsty sand. Not the bones, long since dissolved beneath centuries of shifting earth, nor the battle cries that once shattered the desert air. What endures is something no conquest could erase, no time could diminish, no scholar could rationalize away. It lives in that singular moment when a leprous boy king, his body already claimed by death, made a choice that defied not just an army, but the very laws of possibility. Today, tourists speed past unmarked ground. Children kick footballs across dust that once bore the weight of empires colliding. Pilgrims search for sacred echoes in all the wrong places. Yet, beneath it all, the earth itself remembers what human memory cannot contain: the terrifying thunder of hooves against barren ground, the metallic stench of slaughter hanging in superheated air, the precise moment when impossibility surrendered to human will. For in that half-light between historical fact and transcendent legend, Baldwin still rides, his bandaged hands gripping not just sword, but the very thread of destiny, his dying eyes aflame not with fever, but with terrible purpose that transforms mortality into something divine. This was never merely battle or miracle, never just victory against odds. This was the moment when a boy who should have crumbled instead rewrote the boundaries of human courage. When 500 souls facing certain annihilation became the instrument through which history itself was forced to bow. That is the impossible charge at Montgisard. and it happened. And so, as time sweeps far beyond Baldwin and Saladin, Montgisard transcends battle and myth alike to become something far more intimate, a mirror held unflinchingly before our own souls. In every generation facing insurmountable odds, in every labored breath drawn by those who stare down futures foreclosed by cruelty or circumstance, Montgisard waits with patient certainty, whispering that destiny bends not to numbers or probability, but to the white-hot forge of conviction, sacrifice, and the terrible courage to advance when every rational voice commands retreat. The clash of steel has long since fallen silent, blood absorbed by indifferent sand, yet the challenge reverberates with unsettling clarity across the centuries. What will you do when your personal Montgisard arrives on the horizon? When you stand dwarfed by forces that logic says must crush you, with nothing remaining but failing flesh, in that singular fire that refuses extinguishing? Will you seek the comfortable shadows of reasonable surrender, or will you drive spurs into the ribs of impossibility and charge headlong into the blinding light where legends are born? The same wind that once carried Baldwin's ragged final commands still moves invisible across the world, stirring the deepest chambers of hearts bold enough to truly listen. It asks not for certainty of victory, not even for hope. Only this question, burning like fever in the night. When everything tells you to kneel, will you find within yourself the strength to stand? This is the legacy of Montgisard, not sealed in triumph, but etched in defiance, raw, imperfect, searing. It tells us that history's turning points are not always scripted in palaces or parliaments, but forged in the blinding agony of the outmatched and the near dead. No monument captures Baldwin IV's full truth. No anthem sings of his shattered fingers or the rot that hollowed him from within. Yet in the quietest places, in whispered prayers before surgery, in the trembling breath held at protest lines, in the white-knuckled determination of those who refuse to yield even as the tide crushes down, his charge endures. The world forgets names, dates, battles, but the spirit of Montgisard lives in every soul who faces overwhelming odds with terrible clarity. It burns in the invisible covenant of all who choose, as Baldwin once did, to stand against the numbers, against the death already written, against the silence that would swallow everything. To stand anyway, not with the arrogance of certain victory, but with the dignity of necessary defiance. That, above all else, is what happened at Montgisard. It pulses still in the veins of the desperate and the devoted, in each moment when someone rises, though falling seems inevitable, in each heart that chooses to charge forward when all wisdom counsels retreat. And it happens, even now, whenever impossibility surrenders to human will. And perhaps this is the most haunting legacy Montgisard leaves behind, that even miracles demand payment in blood twice over. Though Baldwin's ravaged body would soon surrender to corruption in a stone chamber, and Saladin would rise again to reclaim Jerusalem with terrible vengeance, the battle carved itself not merely into dusty chronicles, but into the very marrow of human understanding. Century after century returns to this singular moment, searching not for military tactics or political strategy, but for the raw, impossible truth of what it means to face absolute annihilation and still ride forward. That the frail, disease-consumed figure of a leprous boy could so violently alter the course of empires shatters every comfortable assumption we cherish about power, strength, and historical inevitability. Within that fractured reflection, we glimpse our own private battles, silent, unseen, impossible in their particular ways. So as twilight shadows lengthen over hills that once echoed with war cries, and night descends upon forgotten bones and bloodless stones, a final truth lingers in the desert air like a departing breath. Our legacy rests not in victory or defeat, but in that singular moment when we choose to rise against overwhelming darkness, even as we know it may consume us. And it is here, in this quiet twilight, where the roar of gods and kings has faded, that Montgisard reveals its final, piercing truth. History is not solely the record of what was won or lost, but of what was resisted. A dying boy with ruined hands resisted. Fewer than 500 weather-worn souls resisted. They took the sum total of despair, of disease, of hopeless mathematics, and they answered it not with calculation, but with unflinching defiance. And in doing so, they revealed something imperishable buried deep within the architecture of the human spirit. Not strength without pain, not triumph without loss, but the ferocity to matter in the moment we are meant to disappear. The earth at Montgisard holds no marker, no monument to commemorate where blood consecrated sand. Baldwin's leprous body returned to dust, his pain finally silenced. But the ghost of their courage clings to every soul that dares to stand when standing seems futile, to every heart that refuses to surrender when surrender seems inevitable, to every hand that reaches toward hope when hope itself has vanished beyond the horizon. That is the resonance of the impossible charge, an unending echo by which the marrow of history remembers not who survived, but who stood. So when the world seems most inhospitable, when the numbers do not lie and the outcome feels sealed, remember Montgisard, not for its glory, not even for its victory, but as testimony that even in the face of annihilation, choice remains. Not the choice of survival, but of meaning. We are the inheritors of that moment, not through shared blood or belief, but through the unspoken covenant each generation renews with those who sacrificed before. Within each impossible circumstance lives Baldwin's terrible choice, his leprous fingers still pointing the way forward when all paths seem closed. The earth has swallowed his remains, but his defiance burns eternal, a beacon penetrating our comfortable certainties with uncomfortable truth. His voice carries across time not in triumph, but in command, every word forged in fever and pain yet ringing with crystalline clarity, the dying boy king whispering still across the centuries, not promising victory, only purpose. The world will tell you it's impossible. Ride anyway.